Hi, everybody. This is KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Calvin coming to you from Houston, Texas with your tropical update on Saturday, September 17th, 2022. We are still tracking the latest on Tropical Storm Fiona as it moves through the Greater Antilles, namely Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Hispaniola. Here is the latest of the storm as of 7 p.m., as of the 7 p.m. advisory Central Time on Saturday, September 17th. Winds still sustained at 60 miles per hour, making this a pretty strong tropical storm. We're not quite at hurricane strength yet, and you can see the storm is still looking pretty lopsided. We have a lot of convection here on the east side of the storm. Meanwhile, on the west side of the storm, still some dry air trying to work into the storm, which is why we have that lopsided nature to it. So still battling some dry air, still battling some wind shear left over from the last few days, but it is starting to move into an environment that is going to be a little more conducive for development here as we go through the next few days. Still moving to the west-northwest as well, slowing down a little bit, which is not good news for the island chains here because the slower this storm moves, the more rain it's going to be able to put down. So moving at about 10 miles per hour, pressure just below 1,000 millibars now at 998. And again, this is now just to the south of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So let's switch over to the water vapor satellite imagery because this really tells us just exactly how healthy the atmosphere around the storm is. And all of that orange and yellow shading here, that indicates drier air in the atmosphere. The storm has really done a very good job of insulating itself from that drier air because if any of that dry air were to actually try to make it inside that core, it would choke off any new convection, any new thunderstorm development around the core, and that would keep the system weaker. When you start to get that good core of thunderstorms in the middle, kind of insulating that dry air from the actual storm, that's going to be a sign that we could see strengthening here over the next few days. So the storm has really done a good job at insulating itself, even if it isn't the best organized. And this green in here indicates another big burst of thunderstorm activity. So the storm is still alive. It's still healthy. Doesn't look the best right now. But again, winds still sustained at 60 miles per hour as of that 7 p.m. advisory. So as a result, the National Hurricane Center does expect this storm to either get to Category 1 hurricane strength or to get very close to it at least by the time this thing makes landfall here in Puerto Rico. The timing on that is Sunday afternoon. So remember, Category 1 hurricane strength starts at 74 mile per hour sustained winds. We'll be at 75 mile per hour sustained winds. So again, just crossing that threshold. If not, you're going to be close enough to see hurricane conditions on the island of Puerto Rico. Hurricane watch in effect for the U.S. and Virgin Islands there, and then tropical storm warnings in effect for the Dominican Republic. Tropical storm watches as you go a little farther to the west on the island. So obviously the biggest impacts from the storm are going to be here in Puerto Rico, especially since we're going to be on the dirty side of the storm, that right-hand side, that western quadrant of the storm. That's where you get all of the winds coming in the strongest, and that's where you get that storm surge as the storm passes just to the west. So again, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands here definitely going to see some of the worst impacts of this storm as it passes through the area during the day on Sunday. Beyond that, moves back over open water. The Turks and Caicos here are going to be on the western side of the storm. So the storm passes to the east, which means the worst of the storm is going to be out to sea, but still, could see tropical storm conditions especially across the eastern Turks and Caicos as this storm strengthens later Monday into Tuesday, becoming a 90 mile per hour storm by Tuesday afternoon, and then eventually a Category 2 hurricane on approach to Bermuda as we get into the end of the week. So we are expecting this storm to strengthen. Good news though, it does recurve out to sea. The only impacts though that we could be keeping an eye on, again, will be for Bermuda as we get towards Wednesday and Thursday. And again, not expecting anything for us here in Houston. This storm is about 1,000 miles away from us at its very closest pass. So good news, at least for us here in Houston, Texas. Still going to be an issue though for the islands. And again, this extends all the way through Bermuda. More good news though, a couple of days ago, when we first started tracking this storm, the models were all over the place. Some of the computer plots had it going south, others had it coming into the Straits of Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, but a lot of them did have it taking that turn towards the north and west. And we couldn't for sure just say that was going to happen. But now that the storm is better organized, and now that we're a few days into this forecast, notice there's really good consensus now. All of the models take this storm on that northward turn. But again, that then becomes an issue for the Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, and then really Bermuda. Notice how tightly packed the models are right up towards Bermuda. That's going to be a storm system that we'll have to watch later on in the week. But again, does not look like it's going to be a threat to the United States. The reason for that has to do with these big blocking areas of high pressure to the north. So the red shading here indicates the influence that high pressure number 1 and high pressure number 2 are exerting on Fiona down here on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So high pressure acts as a blocking mechanism. So watch what happens now. We start the clock, and keep an eye on it up here. We start the clock this evening, and we fast forward this, and we'll stop the clock here Tuesday, so Monday night into Tuesday morning, and notice what happens to the red shading. The red starts to split apart. This is a weakness in the ridge, so the ridge actually splits into two, and what that does is it gives Fiona an exit path, because tropical systems, they can't go through ridges, they can't go through big areas of high pressures, because again, these act as blocking agents. So when there's a split in that blocking agent, that's an escape route for tropical systems. And watch this, we're going to see that happen here as we get into the end of the week. That eastern ridge goes out towards the Atlantic. The western ridge builds over Texas. This will actually bring us near record-setting temperatures as we get towards Thursday and Friday. And again, it gives Fiona that escape path towards the north. And the question is, where does it go beyond Thursday? And, we have a good idea that it will likely go north and out to sea, but we'll have to keep an eye on it for our friends in New England and up into Nova Scotia. But again, not going to be a threat to any of the southeastern or at least mid-Atlantic seaboard, thanks to this giant area of high pressure here that will deflect Fiona away from the United States. All right, so let's do a little bit of a model comparison. We'll take our two most reliable models, the GFS, the American model here, that's in yellow. The European model, that's going to be in red. And we'll start the clock, and you can see they're in pretty good agreement here. The Euro a little bit slower, a little bit farther south, and again, that's why it's going to be, something for the Turks and Caicos to keep a close eye on. The GFS a little farther towards the north and east here as we get into Wednesday. And then by Thursday and Friday, both models do take the storm just to the west of Bermuda, which is not good news for the island, because remember, when you're on the eastern side of the storm, so it passes you to the west, that's when you're going to see some of the worst impacts. So again, Bermuda really needs to keep an eye on this. And then as we get into Friday and Saturday, it becomes an issue for the Canadian Maritimes, Nova Scotia. I think the Northeast is good for now. They'll have to keep a close eye on this. But again, Mid-Atlantic, Southeast coast looks good with this storm system. All right, right now, though, the focus is going to be the rainfall. Again, through Puerto Rico, through the Virgin Islands, Dominican Republic. I think on the northern shore here, we could see 2, 4, 5 inches of rain. Not out of the question, but it's really Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands here where we could see 9 to 12 inches of rain. We could see over a foot here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, about 6 to 9 inches up towards the British Virgin Islands. And on this extreme eastern cutout here, this extreme eastern portion of Puerto Rico, that's where we could see upwards of 15 or more inches of rain. And so flooding, mudslides becomes a huge concern when you get such a huge amount of rainfall like that in such a small period of time. On the western part of the island, still pretty significant totals, upwards of a half a foot. And, we could even see the islands here, again, just off the east coast of Puerto Rico, in between the Virgin Islands. They could be in that bullseye as well. So the worst of the storm definitely there in that purple shading. Rainfall is going to be the big concern. We could see gusty winds with this, again, in excess of hurricane force. Could see winds gusting 75, 80, 85 miles per hour. But it's the flooding that's going to be the big concern here on the island as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. We are in the peak of hurricane season, so this is not unusual to see storms starting to pop up, but this is the only one that we've got on the map right now. The peak of the season, September 10th, we are just over that hump, but we've got probably another month or so to go as things climatologically or historically speaking start to wind down. But it's not really until mid to late October that we really start to see a big drop in historic activity. That being said, we've seen, even in the last few years, seasons where we get big storms in late October or even in November. So we can't let our guard down yet. Thankfully, it's been a very quiet season. Hopefully it stays that way. Really don't want to track any more of these storms. Hopefully Fiona is the worst that we see. And as of right now, we are not tracking any other significant waves. There's one small wave out in the middle of the Atlantic that has a very low end chance of developing. But that's it. No other imminent threats for us in the tropics here as we move through the peak of hurricane season. Fingers crossed it stays that way. Stay with this YouTube channel. You can follow us on social media as well. We'll be posting constant updates over the next few days as Fiona moves through Puerto Rico, moves through the Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, and eventually up towards Bermuda. And of course, we'll be tracking any other future systems that develop in the tropics.